In the winter of 1863, General Ulysses S. Grant faced a crisis. President Lincoln had placed him in charge of taking a town on the Mississippi River called Vicksburg. For months, Grant had repeatedly tried and failed. Now, his military career was in jeopardy. So was the fate of the war, some believed. Desperate, Grant would devise a strategy so daring, so original, that even his favorite general, William Tecumseh Sherman, doubted its success.
Of ourselves, we cannot take Vicksburg. We may make a desperate attempt, but Vicksburg is as strong as Gibraltar. I do believe the whole thing will fail.
The Mississippi had long been the lifeblood of the nation. A commercial highway transporting goods north and south. Now, its dark, muddy waters were feeding the Confederate war effort, carrying food, ammunition, and reinforcements. From the war's onset, the North's strategy had been to seize control of the Mississippi, shut down the supply route, and split the Confederacy in half. And by the summer of 1862, Federal forces had done just about that. Only one town stood in their way. The river had made Vicksburg a prosperous commercial center, its wealth attracting residents from the North and Europe. For the sheriff's daughter, 13-year-old Lucy McCrae, life was idyllic.
Vicksburg is a place of culture, education, and luxury. Almost every man with a family owning his slaves.
For John Pemberton, the Confederate general in charge of holding Vicksburg, the town was ideal in another way. The bluffs, looming 300 feet above the river, made the town a natural fortress. Any northern boats that dared to pass below were easy targets. Several times, Union forces had tried to take Vicksburg. A naval attack had failed. General Grant's advance from the north had failed too. So had an assault through the swamps. Grant had even tried to bypass the town by building canals. But nothing worked. With time running out, Grant would now ask his men to undertake one of the riskiest maneuvers of the Civil War. On March 31st, 1863, Grant sent his troops south through Louisiana. The plan called for them to cross the Mississippi below Vicksburg and attack the city from the rear. He would imperil the lives of his men by taking them deep behind enemy lines, far from their supply base. One mistake, and he could lose his army. Grant's plan called for one more gamble. He asked Admiral David Porter to undertake the near suicidal mission of sending boats filled with supplies past Vicksburg. On the night of April 16th, the Union fleet slipped quietly down the river. Around midnight, The sky lit up. As deadly fire poured down from the bluffs, Lieutenant Colonel William Strong looked up to spy something strangely beautiful.
It seemed as if heaven and hell had turned everything loose to destroy us. I can never forget, nor can I describe it. The streets were filled with citizens and hundreds of ladies dressed in white. Only those who faced this terrible concentrated fire can have the faintest idea of its beauty.
In town, Mary Loughborough looked on in horror.
My heart beat quickly as the flashes of light from the gunboats seemed facing us. The roar of the Confederate batteries and the screaming, booming sound of the shells as they exploded around the city made a fearful scene to me.
The boat slipped through the gauntlet. Grant's wager had paid off. The Union Army advanced quickly through the Mississippi countryside, mastering the art of mobile warfare, winning battle after battle. Meanwhile, Confederate General Pemberton, stunned by Grant's bold move, hesitated, wondering if he should hold his defensive position in town or chase after Grant. Finally, Pemberton ventured from Vicksburg. But confused and caught off guard, his troops were routed at Champion Hill and Big Black River. Demoralized, his men stumbled back into Vicksburg.
There seemed no life in the city. An anxious gloom seemed to hang over the faces of the men. A sorrowful waiting for tidings that we all knew would tell of disaster.
On May 18th, as 40,000 Union troops arrived outside Vicksburg, their hearts sank. The Confederates had turned the town into an earthen fortress.
The line of fortifications covered the city. There they laid out before us a long line of bluffs, crowned with cannon and lines of heavy rifle pits, as far as the eye could see.
Some men cursed, others prayed. As night fell, Confederate Chaplain William Foster watched his soldiers fall silent.
When he lies down upon the cold ground, the gloomy thought crosses his mind that this may be the last time he ever looks upon the shining heavens. His soul visits the loved ones at home.
On May 19th, Grant hastily attacked with a small force, but was easily stopped. Three days later, he prepared to hurl his entire army against the fortress.
Fire! Clear!
The earth shook as the artillery pounded the Confederates. At precisely 10 o'clock, the Union Army transformed, as one man observed, into a monster serpent, which began to writhe and twist. "30,000 Confederate guns were waiting. A few of General Sherman's men managed to reach the walls of the stockade redan.
As our troops came into view, the enemy rose above their parapets and poured a furious fire upon our line. And for about 2 hours, we had a severe and bloody battle. But at every point, we were repulsed.
Some of General McPherson's men reached the Great Redoubt, carrying ladders, only to find them too short. They also fell back under a hot hail of lead. Major General McClernand's men succeeded in breaching the railroad redoubt. But after hours of hand-to-hand fighting, they too were forced to retreat. Grant's attack had utterly failed. The Confederates suffered only a few hundred casualties, while 3,200 Union men lay dead or wounded on the field that night. Vicksburg was as impregnable as it looked. Grant had little choice but to outcamp his enemy. As spring turned to summer, the siege slowly strangled the life out of Vicksburg. Pemberton cut rations for his men, then cut them again. Dysentery and malaria spread through the ranks. Young Lucy McCrae noticed that dogs and cats in town went missing.
Our provisions were becoming scarce. The Louisiana soldiers were eating rats as a delicacy, while mules were occasionally being carved up to appease the appetite.
Life became a matter of survival. Day and night, Union artillery shells rained down on the town. Fearing for their lives, residents like Emma Balfour moved underground into makeshift caves.
Nearly all the families in town spent the night in caves. When we went into our cave this evening and sat down, the earthy, suffocating feeling as of a living tomb was dreadful to me. For a moment, my heart seemed to stand still. I fear I shall risk death outside rather than melt in that dark furnace.
For 7 weeks, the troops clung to the hope that they would be rescued, but help never came. Desperate to do something, the Confederacy planned an assault on a northern supply depot at Milliken's Bend, guarded by one of the Union's first regiments of black soldiers. As the small brigade from Texas attacked, the black soldiers fell into fierce combat, impressing even the Confederate commander, Henry McCulloch, with their bravery.
Our charge was resisted by the Negro portion of the enemy's force with considerable obstinacy, while the white Yankees ran as soon as the charge began.
With the help of naval gunboats, the Union repelled the attack. The courage shown by the Negro regiments at Milliken's Bend would mark a turning point in the war, convincing the Union to enlist nearly 200,000 black soldiers in the fight against the South. Back in Vicksburg, Grant, determined to break the stalemate, ordered his men to dig trenches.
Every one of us became an Army engineer. Soldiers got so they bored like gophers and beavers with a spade in one hand and a gun in the other.
As they dug, death hovered inches away as sharpshooters scoured the trenches for heads. Union soldiers zigzagged their trenches just to avoid Southern marksmen. On the northern side, Lieutenant Henry Foster built a tower to pick off Confederates. By June 25th, the Union soldiers had tunneled beneath the Fort Hill. They packed gunpowder and blew open a huge crater. Hundreds of troops rushed in. For 26 hours, the men fought hand to hand, but this attack also failed. Frustrated, Grant prepared to roll the dice on one final massive assault. But it wasn't to be. With his men exhausted and sick, General Pemberton had had enough. And on the 4th of July, he surrendered Vicksburg. The largest, most complex campaign of the Civil War was over.
All is still. Silence and night are once more united. It wraps me like a soft garment. How else can I express this peace?
Grant's victory had left the countryside and economy in ruins. But it had also liberated 30,000 enslaved men and women who poured into Vicksburg.
All along the road were Negroes with their families, household goods, everything piled up in their immense cotton wagons. Going to freedom, they sang and danced.
The occupying Union Army built schools for the freedmen. It listed 5,000 U.S. colored troops to police the town and returned many back to work the plantations, this time for pay. Of the white community, the Army demanded loyalty oaths and curtailed civil liberties, sparking outrage and anger. But the occupation of Vicksburg was deemed so successful that the North would make it the model for Reconstruction after the war. In the end, the campaign for Vicksburg would claim 20,000 casualties. American casualties. Together with the North's recent victory at Gettysburg, Vicksburg would alter the course of the Civil War and effectively end the Confederacy's dream of independence. Ulysses S. Grant would go on to lead the Northern armies to victory, while John Pemberton would resign his post in disgrace. And their men, who fought so valiantly, would leave behind this hallowed ground, where today we preserve and honor their sacrifice. At a place on the Mississippi called Vicksburg.